Welcome to the Energy Exchange, a podcast for deep feelers and quiet leaders. Here, we explore what happens when we start working with our natural energy in both our business and personal lives. I'm Colleen Wallach. I'm a highly sensitive professional who spent years untangling patterns of overthinking, people-pleasing, and playing small just to feel safe. Now, I help others like me step more fully into their power without losing the superpower of their softness. We don't have to be loud to be seen, and we don't have to push to be powerful. Everything is energy. Let's start this exchange. Welcome into this week's episode of the Energy Exchange. If you've ever noticed that some relationships start to feel heavier the more you grow into yourself, that's what we're diving into today. I want to talk about reciprocity in every kind of relationship, work, friendship, romantic, all of it. And I'll start with the line that's basically been my mantra for the last year. I am done being a go-to for people I can't go to. So if that hits, you're in the right place. All right, so this has been a really big theme in my life lately, and honestly, something I think a lot of us feel but don't always name. Because when you're wired to give, to help, to show up, to hold space, to fix things, it's really easy to miss how much energy you're actually leaking. And that's what we're going to unpack. And to be clear, there are many reasons you might be wired to give. Like, this is not an altruistic thing necessarily. I did an episode a few weeks back about that. Definitely check that out if you missed it. But however you got to that place of being an overgiver, it likely plays a big role in the relationship dynamics you have co-created with the people in your world. Yes, co-created, that's key. So if you have any people-pleasing tendencies or a history of prioritizing other people, you might not realize how much energy you're leaking without being replenished. And it could be really subtle, guys. Maybe you're always the one adjusting your schedule or your expectations to make a relationship work. Or maybe you share something vulnerable with someone and the conversation quickly turns back to them. A workplace example, maybe you're the one who's always ready to pitch in, you work overtime, but you're seeing other people who do much less, or maybe they're doing a normal amount, right? But they're doing much less than you, get the rewards or the recognition. A lot of times what can happen when you're a natural overgiver, and I'm going to throw in people pleaser, a lot of times what will happen is our flexibility becomes the expectation, not the exception. Today's topic of reciprocity isn't about keeping score. I mean, that's not how real relationships work. Reciprocity is about energy. What I'm talking about when I say reciprocity is the net sum of a relationship over time. What does it feel like to be in that relationship? Do you feel energized or drained when you're around this person? Do you feel seen or overlooked? Are you typically at ease or do you feel on edge? When the overall energy of a relationship leaves you feeling depleted, that's not reciprocity. Something is off there. And again, it's not necessarily a give and take of two people. It's the energy of two people. But that's the level of reciprocity we're talking about here. And the reason this is important to know about yourself is because when you start managing your energy differently, these dynamics will get exposed in any relationship where you've been overgiving. Not because anyone's doing anything wrong, but because reciprocity was never part of the agreement. The relationship dynamic you've had up to this point has likely been built around your overfunctioning. And when that changes, for whatever reason, you're working on yourself, you're getting stronger in your boundaries, you're getting more grounded. But when that changes, the relationship has to respond. And that response is where things can get a little tricky. To understand why this feels so jarring as you get more grounded, it helps to really look at how a lot of those dynamics formed in the first place. I know I found myself in a tricky spot over the last few years. I have a lot of seasons of life, right? I've lived in a lot of places for chunks of time, and I have relationships that were formed during times when I didn't feel the way about myself that I do now. I was always the nurturer, the listener, the one who could hold space for an hour-long rundown of your day without you asking me one freaking question about mine. In those times in life, I certainly prioritized other people's needs over my own. And there was people pleasing in that, a need for external validation, all the things. Whatever the reason for doing so, that was a dynamic that I created and kept alive in many of my relationships. But over time, as I got more grounded, I started prioritizing my own energy, how I show up, what I actually have capacity for, and then what I actually want for my life. The way I used to show up for people does not exist in that same form anymore. And that changes dynamics. Some relationships will make perfect sense for who you were at a particular point in life. And if you're like me, you might have some relationships that formed around your availability, your generosity, your willingness to hold space. And for a long time, maybe that dynamic worked until one day it just didn't. And when you stop overgiving, there's a strange in-between time where you're all of a sudden, or it seems all of a sudden to people in your world, right? But all of a sudden, you're less available, you're more grounded in yourself, and you don't quite know who you are in relationship yet. And the people around you, they don't know this version of you yet. So they're still relating to that old energy. And when you're not, especially in those relationships that have been lacking reciprocity for you, tension is bound to show up. And if you tend to be more sensitive by default, which I'm guessing is true if you're a listener of this podcast, if you're still listening to this episode, it can feel like, gosh, am I doing something wrong? Am I the asshole? Like, why does this feel uncomfortable if I'm actually feeling more regulated? When you've built connections through your availability, this can feel like a loss of identity. If we're not the listener, we're not the fixer, who are we? And there might be some people in your world who are wondering the same thing. So there's a recalibration going on here, not just for you, but for your relationships. I know for me, when I first saw this for myself, I did kind of a 180. Instead of being super helpful, I started questioning everyone's motives. Like I wasn't going to do anything for you. But that wasn't the answer either. That's not who I am. Over time, you meet yourself in the middle. You start trusting your own discernment and your ability to help without overextending or abandoning your own needs. And that middle ground, when you're in that really discerning space, that's when it's really important to check in on the reciprocity of your relationships. It's where you can really see it with a little more clarity. And this isn't something that we just figure out once, right? It's something you keep practicing as you meet new people and you meet new versions of yourself. Okay, so how do we ensure that we're not overgiving in our relationships, that we're maintaining that nice energy flow? For me, my natural tendency is to give people in my close circle the benefit of a doubt, like almost to a fault. I'll tell myself they're busy, they're stressed, they're going through something. Like I will smooth things over internally before I ever name it out loud. So when I am feeling unsure of a relationship, my gut check, and I mentioned it in the beginning, but the way I hold myself accountable is to remind myself I'm not going to be the go-to for people I can't go to. And that's not to blame anyone. It's just to give me clarity and peace of mind. Because if I keep showing up willingly, consistently, without checking in with myself, that becomes the dynamic. And not because anyone's asking that of me, but because I've reinforced it. We teach people how to treat us. So that mantra keeps me grounded and stops me from over-explaining or talking myself out of what I know feels right for me. So I can respond from discernment instead of just my default. So what do we do with that? Like we know our relationship is off balance. We've determined that. Where do we go from here? I think that this doesn't have to mean hard conversations. It really just means adjusting how readily you show up. There are some boundaries that you might have to set in your world. And the best boundaries, they're not about the other people. They're just standards you have for your life. So you can put boundaries in place around your time and your capacity without having to make it personal. You can certainly set parameters without making a big announcement. And how you do this will depend, honestly, on how badly you want the relationship to still exist. Some people might disappear when you're less available or less helpful. Or maybe they shift to someone else who can step in ways that you no longer can or that you're no longer willing to. And again, that's just information that's perfectly fine. There's a lot of advice out there that would suggest that we just cut people off who don't reciprocate effort. I don't know that it's that simple. I think there's nuance to everything. And a lot of times we haven't even communicated our needs because we haven't felt comfortable to do so, or we've been afraid of ending a relationship. I know for me, as I've gotten stronger and more grounded in myself, I do feel more comfortable expressing my needs or saying what I can and can't do. And it does not have to be anything about the other person. I'm just expressing what I need for my day. And if they want to rise to meet that, they can. And if they don't, I think that's okay. It's important to acknowledge that in any relationship, there is a shared energy exchange. We co-create our relationship dynamics. We just do. Acknowledging those shared dynamics doesn't mean taking on responsibility for everything. It doesn't mean blaming someone else for everything. It just means reclaiming our agency going forward. So it's worth maybe softly looking at how you've shown up in ways that weren't actually supportive of yourself. And not to judge yourself, but just to understand the pattern. So if you can lead with that lens in your relationships, like, hey, I am co-creating this energy dynamic here, it opens up a different kind of choice. Like, what do you want this to feel like? What do you want to participate in? And if you want a simple way to check in with yourself on that, here are some questions that I like to come back to. After interacting with this person, do I feel more like myself or less? That's super important. Do I feel expanded or contracted after engaging with this person? And then lastly, if nothing changed here, would I be okay with that? These are the kinds of questions that can help you start trusting what your body is already telling you. And this isn't going to be the dynamic for every relationship in your life, but there are probably some relationships that have survived based on your overgiving. So these are the relationships that we're talking about here. At the end of the day, relationships, they do not have to be perfect. They're not going to be 50-50 all the time, but over time, that net sum matters. When you step back and look at a relationship, you want to notice the overall feeling of it. If the average feels off, that is worth paying attention to. It's easy to underestimate, I think, how much this impacts our energy, our creativity, our health, and our capacity to do more of what we love. And the reality is, not everyone is meant to come along for every season. Relationships will shift. Some will change shape. Some will require less access. But paying attention to that is how we make room for relationships that actually work. All right, I'm going to close it out with that. If this episode spoke to you, a quick review would mean the world. It helps more like-minded souls find this space. You can connect with me also on Instagram at the.energy.exchange. That's with an X. All right, guys, I will chat with you next week.